Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Warrant Officer Stephen Hunt. We warmly welcome the family of Private William Hearn Farrelly, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. You may all sit down again. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private William Hearn Farrelly. William Hearn Farrelly was born on the 6th of June 1918 in Crookwell, New South Wales. He was one of 7 children born to Charles and Emily Farrelly. Known as Stan to his friends and family, he worked as a butcher in Crookwell. His duties included driving the delivery cart, and in this way, he became quite well known in the local district. In June 1940, Farrelly travelled to Goulburn to volunteer for service in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force. He had undertaken compulsory military training, and as a result of his experience, he was temporarily appointed corporal for the duration of training. In early 1941, Farrelly embarked at Sydney and sailed to the Middle East. Arriving in March, he continued his training. In July, he joined his unit, the 2nd 17th Australian Infantry Battalion, which was at that time among the defenders of the besieged port city of Tobruk. In October 1941, the battalion departed Tobruk for Palestine, where it continued training at Camp 69. During the first half of 1942, the 2nd 17th Battalion moved to Syria and Lebanon in support of the Allied campaign against Vichy French forces in that region. In early July, the battalion travelled to Alexandria in Egypt, and from there deployed to the Western Desert in readiness for a showdown with the Axis forces. The British-led Allies defended a line between the Mediterranean Sea in the north and the impassable Qattara Depression in the desert to the south. Allied units took up positions around the tiny desert locality of El Alamein. The 9th Australian Division, of which the 2nd 17th Battalion was a member, was on the right flank of the Allied position on the coast. In September 1942, Farrelly's father received a letter from his son. He mentioned the flies and sand of the desert, but assured his parents that he was healthy and well. In part, he wrote, "I was in a bit of a stoush the other day. We captured about 100 prisoners. It was pretty hot at times, but a man can't let that worry him. He's here to do a job and it's got to be done, no matter what the costs." During September and October, the 8th Army prepared for the main Allied counter-offensive. The men of the 2nd 17th Battalion trained alongside tanks and anti-tank guns so that they knew how to work together on the battlefield. There was still time for recreation though, and the battalion diary notes that the men played cricket and held a surfing carnival. On the night of the 23rd of October 1942, the Allies launched what became known as the Second Battle of El Alamein. After a supporting artillery barrage, the men of the 2nd 17th Battalion crossed a minefield strung with barbed wire to engage the German positions. They held the ground they had captured, but during the fighting on the 25th of October, Farrelly was killed when an enemy artillery barrage landed on Australian positions. He was 24 years old. Farrelly's remains were buried near where he fell. Towards the end of the war, his grave, among more than 7,000 Allied burials of the Western Desert campaigns, was consolidated in El Alamein War Cemetery. His grieving parents chose the inscription for his headstone, "One of the best God could send, dearly loved by all his friends." Farrelly was survived by his parents, his 6 sisters, and his brother. 2 of Farrelly's siblings also served in the armed forces during the war. His older brother, Gunner Charles Farrelly, served in New Guinea and Bougainville in the 4th Field Regiment and returned to Australia in 1945. His younger sister, Corporal Vera Farrelly, served with the Women's Auxiliary Australian Air Force in Australia and was discharged in 1946. Private William Hearn Farrelly's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private William Hearn Farrelly, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozier or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, had thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.